Tonight, Tibetans are gathering for the celebrations of Tibetan New Year called Lhosar. In Tibet, we celebrate Lhosar for about 2-3 weeks. Officially, Lhosar is for 3 days. The food is very important, eating whole day long, especially butter tea.
When you look at how Tibetans in exile have developed with their foodways, you find a lot of adopting of Indian food, Nepalese food. So if you go to a Tibetan gathering, you'll very often have rice and dal and different curries, and this is not indigenous Tibetan food.
I came to England in 1972. Now we are called Dashiling, a new name given to the Tibetans who are settling in this area.
It is great that now there's a big enough community where you have your gatherings and you have a Tibetan restaurant and you really have a sense of a community.
Today we have most important guest, Ajahn Mujay. He's a very high incarnation Lama. He said everybody must be united. The words of Tibetan people in Tibet must be heard by the world. So this is the only one we can do at the moment, because our approach is in the peace way.
This is the Tibetan altar. It's very important to have His Holiness Portal in the middle of it, or the Buddha. It represents the center of gravity, because everybody, Tibetans, Buddhists, whoever it is, and they don't have unconditionally the respect because of his thoughts, what he done to all sentient beings. Somebody, the man stable died, even though this stable died, they just offer this to not cherish yourself, but cherish every sentient beings around to you.
This year, actually, we don't have proper Lhosar because what happened in Tibet. But as a cultural preservation, we do have this event just for the prayers and get together with your traditional clothes and food and stand with Tibetans in Tibet. Hopefully we'll be same in a few years' time. From Tibet and inside Tibet, and all these losses become same and great celebration.
We've just been looking at objects from the Horniman collection, all related to Tibet and food. It's actually not very often that I have a chance to see objects this old from Tibet, and also to see this many and the way they've been laid out where we can just sort of brainstorm. I'm just really sort of fascinated by everything. I feel like I don't really know enough about the objects and I just want to find out more.
I was excited to see that there's a leather pouch and used for tsamba eating. You put tsamba in there and then add tea and then you make a small lump of dough here and then we eat it. So it's very useful. I haven't seen this kind since I was a child, so I was very excited to see this.
For Tibet, it's much better to display in a museum rather than hidden in somewhere or lost. Because it's a historical object, it's our identity in the same way. It's symbolic for our culture and our tradition.
People here are coming from really different backgrounds. They're all linked with Tibet in some ways, so we're trying to get very different understandings of the objects. Not just kind of academic understandings, not just what they're used for, but what they might mean, what they might mean in the context of being Tibetan today as well, and in the context of ritual practice. So really very diverse points of view is what we're after.
China and Tibet had a lot of interconnections, and particularly the monasteries, the monks, traded in a lot of Chinese goods, clothing, tea bowls, metalwork. There's not a sharp division between them.
Because although we're talking about the Tibetan world, we also wanted to show that there's a lot of material cultures and customs that are sort of cross-border.
Well, a lot of the objects were quite familiar. Several from Yatung, where I was born, and several from Gangsi, where my elder brother was born. So hence there was a family connection with some of the places and objects. When I first came to this country to study, Colonel Bailey invited me up to where he was living in Norfolk. I hadn't realized that he had contributed so many to the collection here at Horniman's. So that was the other emotional thing to see.
It's a lovely event, just looking at the Tibetan objects in the museum and all around spiritual food and ordinary food.
This is tsamba. It's made from barley. Barley is toasted and then grounded. And this is Tibetan dry cheese. You eat with tsamba or you put in the soup. This is Tibetan New Year cookie called bulu. Then we got here tea. Tibetan butter tea is made from this. You break it and boil it. Then we mix milk, salt and butter. We really don't measure anything, just do it. And then once After a while, you can get used to it. This is the Tibetan teacups made from wood. So this is a Tibetan butter tea.
After lunch, Lama Zangmo from Samyeling, from London Centre, gave us a Thorma presentation here. They explained how it's not just an offering, but it's an offering that goes through your body, but also through your mind, and you kind of have this dual approach to eating and then this spiritual approach to food, which was really interesting.
I think that's important to know that when these are offered, it's not just an outer ritual. It's a ritual that has an inner meaning, a very deep inner meaning, and it's all about training the mind when we do those practices.
We offer it to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. Partly it's to generate merit through our practice that we do these things, so that we have good future lives, good environment in the future, and so that we can progress along the path. The word tor, the origin of the word is throw or scatter. So after it's been used in the ritual, then if it's not a sok torma that we eat, then you would take it outside and throw it away, and then wild animals would eat it.
The idea to scatter is really the idea of all our practices about destroying our ego, so ego clinging.
Afterwards, we did a workshop on Lhaka, White Wednesday, the non-resistance movement from Tibet. It's all about eating Tibetan food, wearing Tibetan clothes, speaking Tibetan language, dancing Tibetan dance, singing Tibetan songs, and just doing everything Tibetan on a Wednesday. And also, like, the common denominator again and again is actually food. We had some tentok, which Sonam and Seppel prepared in the kitchen this morning, very traditional Tibetan food. And then Dechen talked about the revival of Tsampa and the Tsampa eater.
When the Tibetan resistance against the Chinese was at its height, so let's say in 1959, the one unifying thing that all Tibetans had in common was that Tibetans were eating Tsampa. Nowadays, you can actually go to the supermarket in Tibet and you can buy cookies made from tsampa in glossy packaging. Sweet tea can also be seen as a firm political statement because it's associated with India. And Tibetans like to associate themselves with India and look towards India because India is considered a sacred place, the home of Buddhism and also the home of the Dalai Lama. I started to notice that important parts of the social networking sites were named after tsampa and sweet tea. It just shows you how, closely tsampa and sweet tea are associated with Tibetan identity.
Dormala and Jamyang actually demonstrated how to make tsampa. It was interesting because it also connected with what Dechen said, that in the sign language for deaf people in Tibet, Tibet is this sign, which is like basically the kneading of the tsampa. Sarah and Tom asked the group and asked us what we think we would like to see for the future, how these objects should be displayed and what is the best way of displaying it, engaging it from a non-Tibetan point of view but also from a Tibetan point of view. And if the result of this day could be that it kind of changes or improves or diversifies the way that the Tibetan objects in this museum can be laid out and made more accessible, that would be like a really great achievement.